Welcome back. The government will be buying back Telecom Slovenia's 50% shareholding in Telecom. The move is said to be a temporary one in light of the ongoing sale of the Slovenian group, with government now having full ownership of the telecommunications company. With a purchase price of €47.7 million, government says it now aims to find another investor.
The announcement took place at Telecom's Main Street office and saw the company's shareholders formalise the buyback with a share purchase agreement. Speaking at the event, the Chief Minister said the move enables government to influence the way forward on the ownership of a communications business that plays an important role for the ROC.
Now, what's going to happen to Telecom Slovenia is that it's not going to be selling Telecom alone. It itself is being broken up and sold as a decision of the Slovenian government. So in order to avoid Telecom Slovenia selling the shares in Telecom to a third party that is not of our choosing, we are deciding to take on the shares from Slovenia Telecom ourselves and find for ourselves a new strategic partner.
The transaction is due to be completed in December at a price of €47.7 million. Government is committed to finding a new strategic partner and is confident that there will be plenty of interest expressed.
There are two things that I think it's important for people to understand. We want to maximise shareholder value here. We've purchased the shares for €47.7 million. We want to maximise that shareholder value by selling for more than that, or at least for selling in a way that is going to maximise that over the long term if we find the right strategic partner. And the second is that because we're 100% shareholders now for the interim period, we're not going to step in as a shareholder and start running this company as if it were a government department. This company has an independent management. It has done a great job in bringing the company to where it is. We have confidence in the independent management of the company, and we're not going to interfere in the way that it is run.
Describing the relationship as a great partnership, Telecom Slovenia are proud to have been part of Telecom's success story.
Actually, it's truly a sad day because we were really proud to have this part of Gibraltar, Telecom, in our portfolio. But you know, as Chief Minister said, Telecom Slovenia is in the privatization process, and we fully respect the decision of Gibraltar government to determine the future of Telecom.
In moving forward under the new ownership change, Telecom CEO Tim Bristow says it's business as usual. We asked him whether these were uncertain times for the company.
No, I think as a company and the management, we're pretty confident that we're doing the right job, we're doing a good job. The company's very successful. I suspect it's been one of the most successful parts of the Telecom Slovenia group in terms of its return and what it's been doing. And so I should think they look with sadness at leaving it. I should think the government look with excitement about the opportunity to find a new strategic partner for the business. But for us, who run the business, it's business as usual. The government's always been a shareholder. It is simply just temporarily increasing that shareholder so that it can decide how the company moves forward.
Is it also an opportunity, perhaps, to address the issue of continued growth and development with a new partner coming in?
Well, of course, but I think that question exists every day for the company. How do we continue to be the success that we believe we've been so far? And so that we're addressing and looking at that question every day. Of course, shareholders are important to that question, and if it comes in the form of the government or a strategic partner, then their input and views are very welcome.
And the focus for government now will be on finding a future strategic partner for the main telecommunications provider on the ROC.
Meanwhile, the opposition raised a number of questions regarding the government's plans to buy back Telecom Slovenia's 50% shareholding in Telecom.
In a press release issued by the GSD on the Telecom share purchase, the opposition says it appreciates the government's thinking, but it has questions to which it now seeks answers to. Especially, it says, as the announcement has been made after the deadline for asking questions at this week's Parliament session.
I think there are important questions to ask. Firstly, I think we ought to know where the money is being sourced from. We didn't vote this money at the time of the budget in June. We want to know where it's being sourced from. Is it, for example, going to be sourced from Credit Finance Company Limited? Again, you've heard the arguments in relation to that. That company is, in fact, being used for a considerable amount of public expenditure. and we want to know whether it is being sourced from that particular company. Secondly, I think it is also important to establish when the government intends to sell on to a private sector company. The Chief Minister has said that he doesn't want to be rushed into a decision in relation to this. Fine, but I think he ought to proceed as diligently as possible to ensure that the model which has worked so well in the past, i.e. where you have a private international stakeholder in our telecommunications industry, is there and continues into the future.
The GSD's deputy leader says that the opposition requires full transparency from the government in order to make a well-informed judgment on the matter.
The Chief Minister, Fabian Picardo, has strongly suggested that the GSLP and the Liberal Party will again present a joint lineup at the next general election. He was speaking to our news editor Stephen Nish on this week's Direct Democracy.
I have seen absolutely no reason why Jose Garcia and I will not be recommending to our respective parties that we continue to fight elections together. It's much easier to go into Parliament as a government if you fought the election together than it is to find yourself in a hung Parliament and having to try and merge two manifestos into one, as we've seen the Conservative and the Liberal parties having to do in the United Kingdom. I think both our parties are very pleased with the work that we have done together. There is no talk in either of the parties of wanting to split the alliance in any way, and therefore I think you can comfortably predict that you'll be looking at the GSLP Liberal alliance before the next election. But look, in the GSLP and in the Liberal Party we practice democracy, and if any member of the executive wishes to move a motion in the executive to consider this issue, it would be considered. If a member wanted to have this issue reconsidered in a general meeting, it would have to be reconsidered, or even in a meeting before the general election. That's how open and democratic we are, and despite that, all our members seem to be very keen to see us continue working together and delivering together for the whole of the community.
Meanwhile, the opposition accused the Chief Minister of a complete abrogation of political responsibility for seeking to blame the Royal Gibraltar Police for the lack of enforcement of the Nature Protection Act in relation to fishing with nets by Spanish fishermen. This follows remarks on this issue by Fabian Picardo in the Direct Democracy programme. But the government in turn accused the GSD of wanting to control the police and direct the Commissioner to arrest who they want. The first non-Briton to receive a Heritage Trust Award has returned the award after feeling entirely abandoned on the restoration of Devil's Gap Battery. On Monday, Bart van Tienen returned his award and has decided to stop working on Devil's Gap Battery, and he says there has been an embarrassing restoration attempt by a contractor.
Bart van Tienen received his award less than 3 weeks ago. He won for his consistent efforts to voluntarily improve and upgrade numerous heritage items and sites. However, a turn of events has meant that Bart has decided to return the award to the Heritage Trust.
At a certain moment, I wish to thank very much Minister John Cortes for that. I asked for government support, and he always been very supportive for this, as did the government. So he agreed to send a civil servant to go and see what was needed. The work was agreed on. I will explain exactly what the standards were. And unfortunately, when I came back, some work was done, some concrete was poured. That absolutely does not fit into the site. So absolutely, of course, I lose entirely my trust. So I will give today back my membership card. I will give back the keys of the battery and my Heritage Trust Award that I do not think should be given to me in such circumstances.
What was the reply that you received from the Heritage Trust?
Several days there's been loads of emails going on, and the reply I received was absolutely not what I like. They said, yeah, it's okay, there's no problem, you make so much of it. They said, no, this is a Class A monument, so you should be the guardians that are responsible for things not happening. So they have absolutely no interest to really deal with this problem.
Am I now correct in saying that you have cut all ties with this project?
At this moment I want to make a very significant symbolic act by saying, look, I am not happy with this is not how it's supposed to go, and we'll see from there what's happening.
Here Bart has returned his Heritage Trust Award he won for the 3 years he spent renovating Devil's Gap Battery. This is the area which was covered by cement. The workers here are painting the concrete they poured over the historical monument. These works were ordered by a civil service worker. Bart says this is disrespecting the original dimensions with improper finishings. Over the past 3 years, he spent his own money acquiring tools and paid for a trip to the UK and Ireland in order to learn how to restore this battery. For now, Bart will not continue with his voluntary renovation work.
And the Heritage Trust wanted to set the record straight over the sequence of events that drove Bart van Tienen to return his award.
Here is Bart van Tienen receiving his award 3 weeks ago, which he has now returned. This is a corner before concrete was poured over it. And this is what Mr. van Tienen has called an embarrassing restoration attempt. In reply, the Heritage Trust have said Mr. van Tienen was completely premature on his part when returning his award, and they say he chose to cancel a meeting with the chairman of the Heritage Trust. The Trust said after Mr. van Tienen cancelled this meeting, he decided to vent his frustration on social media, whilst also sending profane emails to members of the Trust and GHD staff. Following this, the Trust have said Mr. van Tienen threatened to take the issue to the press if they did not meet his demands. The Trust would like to clarify that all of Mr. van Tienen's work at the battery has been fully supported, and they have always made themselves available to meet him at his request, often at short notice. The Heritage Trust is keen to continue with the Devil's Gap battery project, and all agreed expenses carried out by Mr. van Tienen have been reimbursed to him. However, this does not include his private trip to Ireland.
This week, the Environmental Safety Group welcomed the recent publication of the fishing regulations, but highlighted issues of concern headed by the enforcement.
The Environmental Safety Group says the big question is on enforcement, which in areas such as littering has not been at all effective to date. The ESG believes it will be much harder to control fishing, a 24-hour practice which is often clandestine and in remote areas. It adds that if the Department of the Environment is to lead on enforcement, this will require a dedicated team, also on a 24-hour basis, to cover monitoring and enforcement duties. The group believes it's critical for the success of any fishing regulation that the enforcement is applied robustly. The ESG hopes that in applying enforcement measures, fishing enthusiasts are also encouraged to take greater care of the condition in which they leave shore-based sites. The Environmental Safety Group also believes that in the spirit of the fishing regulation aims to ensure sustainable fishing practices, longline fishing should be stopped. The ESG says it recognizes the difficulties faced by local enforcement agencies to stop harmful Spanish fishing practices at sea. It says given the bay is one large ecosystem, it's hoped that cross-border regulations can be the next target so as to move the issue from being a political one to an environmental one.
The Equality Rights Group has announced it will be campaigning for full marriage rights for everyone in Gibraltar. ERG says it recognises the advance that civil partnership legislation has delivered to the community, but believes equality is not about separate status. Christine Vasquez asked ERG... That's a tongue twister. ERG. 5432. The Equality Rights Group has announced it will be campaigning for full marriage rights for everyone in Gibraltar. ERG says it recognises the advance that civil partnership legislation has delivered to the community, but believes equality is not about separate status. Christine Vasquez asked ERG Chairman Felix Alvarez why he feels civil partnership does not go far enough.
Civil partnership has been a great advance, without any doubt, and we celebrated it and we acknowledged that at the time. We also, on the very day that the law passed here at Parliament Building, we also said that we would consult with people as to whether they felt this was enough. Now, the consultation results has been that 90% of people feel that this is not enough. We're an equality rights organisation. We're not a separate rights organisation. And so therefore, on the very principle, and just on that, that the law should treat everybody in exactly the same way. We see no reason for any kind of apartheid in the way that the law treats one sector of the community as opposed to another. Apart from that, there are practical issues around civil partnership, which in effect means that people who are civilly partnered are not necessarily recognised across the European Union. That means that a very fundamental European right, that of freedom of movement, is severely curtailed.
And that's all for News Review. Remember, you can... Sorry, 5432. And that's all for News Review. You can find out more by heading over to our website, gbc.gi/news. You can also find us on Twitter and on Facebook as well. Thank you very much for watching. From the team, good night.